Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Work Well podcast. This episode is brought to you with thanks to the Fruit People. Fruit People are leading the way in workplace nutrition, both in office and remotely. Check out thefruitpeople.ie for more. Today in the show, I'm delighted to welcome Lisa Finnegan. So Lisa has over 17 years experience working in HR for technology companies, and was recently promoted to VP of International HR BP or HR Business Partners for the EMEA region. That also includes Africa, Latin America, and Asia Pacific regions at LinkedIn. So in other words, I think she's responsible for every region apart from North America. So she's a gym and fitness enthusiast. And as you'll hear, she's a real wellness ambassador at LinkedIn. So Lisa and I discussed some interesting topics in this chat, everything from fertility to community, and there's even a mention for what could be the world's first workplace wellbeing intervention featuring the ukulele. So you're going to learn a lot here, so sit back and enjoy my chat with Lisa Finnegan. Lisa, hello and welcome to the Work Well podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian. Great to be here.
Pleasure to have you on the podcast. How are you?
I am good. Absolutely good. Yeah, it's been an interesting year, I think, for many reasons, as we can all attest to. But, working from home has definitely become the new normal for us. And feeling very fortunate in that we were just given a company-wide week off, which we called Rest Up Week, to help our employees kind of combat just that fatigue of, working and living from home. So that was very much needed and very much appreciated by us all, I think.
Oh, so that just happened, did it?
It did, yeah, absolutely. So the week before last, we were all on a company-wide Rest Up Week, and it's a huge difference when the whole company is off versus just yourself.
I do speak about that, offering a Wellbeing Day. I say if you can give employees some time off, the day off, and if possible, make sure it's the same day. Otherwise, you're coming back to a full inbox.
Exactly.
Lots attached. So is this globally the entire company, or is it
globally? Yeah, all 16,000 of us. Oh. So we've all been there. We've all kind of looked to take a Friday or a Monday off, and by the time we come back in and get through our email, we're having this conversation like it wasn't even worth taking the day. So just knowing that like all of your colleagues were off as well and coming back to literally an empty inbox the following Monday, it was game changer. Yeah, I'm going to petition to keep it.
That's a dream, isn't it? The inbox zero, coming back to inbox zero. Yeah,
totally.
And so tell us, how is work, apart from the week off, of course, how is work, how is life at the moment?
Yeah, life is good. I mean, I feel very fortunate in that, my husband is also working from home. It's, we have our 3-year-old dog who has never had a better existence than over the last year because he gets walked 3 times a day. And so, really struggled, I think, at the start of lockdown, just trying to adapt to a new routine. I would have loved the gym and just, really struggled when all of those facilities were closed down. And we took an active, very conscious decision to make sure we were still building in like our walks during the day. We do a fake commute in the morning. So the time that we would have used on our commute, we actually channel into a walk with the dog. And just little behavior changes like that, just to try to get some sort of sense of normalization and routine, we found was a big help. And then also just trying to learn when to switch off. So actually closing down the laptop, leaving the desk, having a separate work area if you can at all from where you kind of cook or eat or watch TV. I appreciate not everybody is in that position, but doing whatever you can to distance yourself from work so that you have that shut off time. And I think that was a big learning, certainly for me over this last year, was that because people were working and living from home, those work hours really just blended into the evening time, particularly because we are a US company. We've so many colleagues in the US, and you weren't leaving the office. There wasn't that like natural shut off point. And so we definitely found ourselves taking later and later calls. And we've taken an active kind of step now to try to reintroduce, you know, normal working patterns and behaviors. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's an ongoing challenge. And I think a lot of companies probably find themselves in that position. Just how do we balance employee well-being, mental health with productivity? And, you know, obviously the company's having a great year because people aren't taking as much vacation or working incredibly hard. But that will lead to burnout. And that was one of the reasons we decided to do Rest Up Week.
Yeah, very good, mate. That makes so much sense. So, I mean, Rest Up Week is clearly an initiative then that grew out of this, and I imagine kind of employee feedback. Anything else of interest, kind of well-being initiatives, if you like, that you found that have been working throughout the course of the last year?
Yeah, for sure. So we introduced a whole program called Lift Up. And that was very much targeted around kind of just the different wellness tenants. And so part of that was that we had actually Brezzy. I don't know if you know Brezzy. He came in and he did the lockdown ukulele rockdown project.
I saw that.
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. We had like 300 employees, kind of almost like co-exploring principles of mindfulness and also how to play the ukulele. And we had 1,000 colleagues come together in December for almost like a year-end party. And we had a virtual musical festival together now for the whole company. So that we did some reporting off the back of that, and we saw a 20% uplift in people's mood, which was great. So really trying to think of, you know, creative ways, not just ways that are going to cost the company, you know, a lot of money, like a shutdown week, but also things like where we're just bringing together that sense of community. And really kind of trying to just get creative, because I think a lot of what we used to do is no longer applicable, right? So we used to have our food program in the office, we used to have our gym, and obviously now we're really trying to think outside of that box. And I have to give a huge shout out to our compensation and benefits team, who, you know, really have been, you know, absolute lifesavers over this last year in helping us think about our wellness approach, our wellness strategy, whilst we've been transitioning to this remote work. So big kudos to them.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, that's the first kind of ukulele related well-being initiative
right.
I've heard of, but it does sound fantastic. Yeah, and well, I'm actually from Stony Batter originally, so I think it was mentioned when Stony Batter is mentioned in the top 10 hipster locations. The number one point that comes up that this is a fact, there was actually ukulele lessons for under 8-year-olds.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. I love it. Yeah. You know, I took a ukulele myself. I am not musically gifted, challenged, I think is more accurate. But just to have that bit of crack, you know, and feel like you're part of a community, and the weekly connection points versus just seeing people for work-related meetings, you know, this kind of, it sort of broke the mold, and seeing people that you probably hadn't seen in a year, you know, because they sit in different parts of the business it was really special, actually. So yeah, huge kudos to those guys. And that's just kind of one program as part of Lift Up, right? So it goes across everything from self-care, so mental health, work and family balance. So we offered 60 days of paid leave, in addition to PTO, which was emergency family accommodation. And that was specifically for parents of children whose schools had closed and who had no other childcare options. And you could take that, you know, in chunks of time versus needing to take it all as one. So, or for people who had parents perhaps in nursing homes, and those nursing homes were closed. So really trying to think about how we're helping that kind of family work balance was a huge part of kind of our Lift Up offerings. You know, we would have done webinars for parents and like, how are people coping with having children at home? And I think we kind of tried to normalize having guest appearances from children on different Zooms. Yeah, exactly. As so many people have had to deal with. And then I think just different, you know, they call it surprise and delight moments, just to reward the team. So that can be something very small, like doing like a no meeting day, all the way, as I mentioned, to kind of Rest Up Week.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's such a wide mix there. And the 60 days paid leave is particularly impressive now, I must say. Incredible support.
Yeah.
We're a year in, we're a little over a year in now to this lockdown.
I know.
I know, it's hard to believe.
I know.
Everyone's talking about Zoom fatigue, and People have tried the virtual coffees, the virtual quizzes. I mean, even the ukulele lessons, which sounded fantastic and great fun. Is there anything that's ongoing, or I mean, is there anything new you're trying, or you found that has been kind of a consistent engagement? Or you kept mentioning the word community there, a community piece that is kind of lasted the distance, or are you continuously kind of pivoting to try new things to keep people engaged?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel like at the start of lockdown, I mean, you know, everybody was doing it, the general knowledge quizzes, the happy hours on a Friday. And that's really kind of evolved now to just letting people just disconnect, and less screen time is better. So it feels like there's just a moment in time, you know, that you've got to be aware of people's just changing needs and changing behaviors. And, you know, it was a bit of fun back in, you know, May and June, when we were out of the office just a couple of months, to do our happy hours on a Friday evening. And honestly, like, just talking to my team, by the time 5 o'clock on a Friday comes around, the last thing we want to be doing is sitting on another Zoom call, right? And so it's just acknowledging that, and being okay to disconnect. And that's kind of the next body of work for us. There's a team internally who is kind of looking at, you know, building in the remote commute, as I mentioned, you know, my husband and I do here at home, but how do we build that in, like, at a corporate level? Is there something you can put on, you know, your Teams messenger to show that you're actually, you know, you're out of office, even though you're still at home, there's nowhere we can go, right? But you're out of office and not to be contacted, and to kind of help people, you know, respect that time off, and stop the blurring of the lines, or at least reduce some of the blurring of the lines. You know, we're becoming more conscious of people's working hours. So actually having, you know, on your signature, these are my working hours. And then I think building in that flexibility, particularly when the schools were closed, I think was absolutely critical. So being able to be aware that, you know what, some people are homeschooling from 9 till 12. And so their work hours might actually be 7 to 9, and then they come back online in the afternoon. Or they might start early and go late. It's not about a 9 to 5 during a pandemic. It's about trying to respect that flexibility, what works for the individual as much as what works for the company. So I think that's been our big learning, and really looking at, you know, when we stagger these meetings, and when we try to come together, being aware that people are juggling a multitude and are really struggling.
Sure. And you've touched on this already, and we very recently had the right to disconnect, you know, a code of practice.
Absolutely.
Used by the government. Does that change anything within LinkedIn? You're probably already accommodating a lot of this already by what you're talking about here. Is there kind of formal policies in place around this, around kind of the work-life balance? Or does this right to disconnect, is that supported in any way, or add to it?
Look, I think it's a great policy. I think, you know, it's very progressive. I think all employees should have the right to disconnect. I think what we look to our employees is to try to draw our own lines and our own boundaries around, you know, when that is versus when it isn't. And I think just empowering people to put their own working hours, right, on their email signature is a great step. And I've seen very senior leaders do that. This isn't something that, you know, our entry level or individual contributors are doing. You know, we have, and it's not just for parents, right? This is for all people. Like, my team know I will take the time in the morning to do my commute or to do a workout or whatever it is. But likewise, I can come online then later on that evening and do the work that I need to do. So rather than trying to define the hours that work for people, we're really asking our people to define the hours that work for them. And as I said, still a lot of work to be done in that space. I definitely wouldn't want to see it as a tick box, we've nailed it. I do think that in particular over the last year, you know, I've seen people put in more hours than I'm comfortable with. And I will continue to advocate and to evangelize the need for more balance.
Very good. You know, I like that. I like the idea of empowering people, and the fact that leaders are leading by example in that area as well. Kind of echoing a lot of what we had Mary McCluskey from Permanent TSB on recently, and she was talking about this like at a team level. So they have, I feel like, almost a charter. They come together as a team and say, look, this is our working hours as a team. These are the hours we work. This is when we're effectively switched off. Nice. And empowering each team, if you like, to come up with their own charter, as she called it, for that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that idea. When I reflect on my own team and kind of our own needs, I have people in different countries and different time zones. And so it's about trying to, again, balance that. Like tomorrow is a national holiday in Brazil. So I have an employee who works out of our Sao Paulo office. He won't be online, obviously. And so it's just about kind of, trying to be able to flex for me down to the individual as much as you want to have consistency across the team as well. It's an ongoing balance.
Of course, yeah, and we didn't even mention that your actual role, and by the way, congratulations! I think you were recently promoted to the VP of International HR VP for it's Europe, Middle East, Africa, Latin America, and Asia Pacific. So you've got a wide geographical spread there.
I know, it's quite the mouthful, right?
Yeah, it was,
yeah. It's probably easier to just say everything outside of North America, which I think is accurate. So define it by what it isn't. Yeah, absolutely. So just in this last week, so I'm still coming to terms with the new role. My role previously had been HR for Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. And we've just recently added Asia Pacific to that. So really excited to get going. But again, just even self-reflection, thinking, how am I going to manage, Asia hours with my European hours with, my boss lives in California. So how do I get to talk to her and also talk to my team in Singapore? So that's going to be my challenge for 2021.
Well, how do you? Do you work Irish hours on a Monday, US?
Yeah, literally. So my plan is to do early mornings, Mondays and Tuesdays.
Right.
And then I'm going to start late on a Wednesday, take care of myself, do the morning, take the morning off.
Yeah.
And then I typically do a US call on a Wednesday evening with my team in the US. And then I'll do European hours Thursday. And then I really do try to just keep Fridays free of meetings and actually just get caught up on what needs to get done, carving out time to think about strategy, think about planning versus kind of being in that reactive mode Monday to Thursday. If I can just carve out 20% of my week on looking to the future, then that's a success. So my meetings are pretty intensive Monday to Thursday, but that's how I'm thinking about it. We could talk again in 6 months and it might have all gone out the window, but let's see what happens.
Very good. No, that's an interesting challenge, all right. But it's the kind of the modern working world, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the remote world, yeah.
100%. And it's strange because in a normal year, I would be on a flight going to Singapore to meet the team, and obviously that's not an option. So even just I'm suddenly way more empathetic to people who've started new roles, right, and haven't had that face-to-face time to build those relationships. Has been incredibly challenging. And I knew that intellectually over the last year, but I think it doesn't become real unless you're in that situation yourself. And so this is it's going to be an interesting insight for sure.
Absolutely. And I imagine when travel does come back here, there will be a lot of travel involved with the role.
Yes and no, Brian. I think if this last year has taught us anything, it's that we can do an amazing amount virtually, an amazing amount more virtually than we thought we could. And so I am really going to challenge myself to reduce my air miles. My carbon footprint was probably fairly substantial over the last few years in terms of the amount of travel that I've had to do. And I really would like to make it a personal goal to reduce that. Of course, you're going to have to get out there a couple of times a year, but it doesn't need to be, I don't need to be on a plane every week, which is kind of what it was before the pandemic kicked in. So yeah, a little bit of travel, but I'm really going to do my best to not kind of lose the head.
Well, that's a kind of nice, positive outcome of all this, isn't it? Kind of the virtual world. You can actually get an awful lot done remotely. Yes, it's challenging in terms of the hours, as you've mentioned, but you actually there's a lot you can get done without being physically in a room with somebody.
Yeah, and I think it's about striking that balance, right? Of just, when does it really need to be face to face? I think we just fall into this habit of jump on a plane, you go see people on the regular basis. Whereas, if anything, this last year has taught us is that you can actually have really tough conversations virtually. And so it's about just kind of trying to strike that new balance. But yeah, I mean, it is definitely a positive outcome, right? There's, I think this last year has been a positive for the environment, if not for ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, very true. Tell me about the well-being perspective then, from again, looking at it from the international idea. One of the challenges I've seen from a well-being perspective is there's a global organization, they're in many different geographies, they have this overall, really well-intentioned well-being program, but it kind of doesn't fit locally with a lot of the local hubs, if you like. They can't relate to it. Maybe the local needs and wants aren't included. LinkedIn seem to have booked a trend in that regard. I mean, I've been to the offices in Dublin. It seems to be very much, it's a US organization, as you mentioned. There seems to be an awful lot going on, Irish-led, if you like, on site.
So.
How does that work? Tell me about the actual structure, if you wouldn't mind, about the well-being structure within LinkedIn.
For sure. I mean, as I mentioned at the start of this, it sits within our compensation and benefits team. So Catherine Gilbert is our senior leader across the region. She's responsible for Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. So EMEA, as we call it, and LATAM. And her team, including Ursula, I think you know Ursula, Brian. She's kind of our wellness guru. They have just done phenomenal work in making sure that it's fit for purpose across the region. And exactly to your point, there is absolutely no logic in having, these expensive programs that get rolled out that actually are not fit for purpose. And so some of the things that we really double down on are our local employee resource groups. And so they are, frontline employee led. We have chapters in each office. They're striving towards the same strategic goal, but how they do it can be very different, right? So if I think about our Out It In resource group, who are LGBTQ plus community, they might organize Pride in London or Dublin, and how we kind of show up in different ways is really employee and frontline led, which is really cool, versus like a leader sitting somewhere in California trying to roll out something that they think is relevant. And so credit to our leaders in California, they give us budget and they give the autonomy to go ahead and do that. But a lot of what we do is really led by our employee resource group. And then, as I mentioned, our compensation and benefits team kind of put the framework around the lift up platform, as you will, which is our surprise and delight moments at more of a corporate level. Probably a really good example is if I reflect on Rest Up Week. So we were offering Monday to Friday off in most of the globe. Our office in Dubai works Sunday to Thursday.
Oh, yes.
And so, of course, we flex and they took the Sunday to Thursday versus the Monday to Friday. Sure. But it's just being cognizant, to your point, of what's going to work in different geographies.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. And so you mentioned, so Catherine heads up the team, if you like. You've got Ursula, is it full-time? The wellbeing leader, is it, on site in Ireland?
Yeah.
You're a wellbeing ambassador yourself. Is that right? I saw that in your profile.
Fabulous. Great. I will always be an ambassador for our wellness program, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I think honestly, we all need to be wellness ambassadors, right? We have 1,600 employees in our Dublin office. We've got 2,800 across the region, across EMEA and LATAM, and about another 1,500 in APAC. So these are significant numbers, and you kind of really can't be a leader and not be a wellness ambassador, because ultimately wellness impacts your team, impacts, their mental health, impacts, how everybody sort of shows up. Mm-hmm. I've done a fair bit of work on kind of the fertility side of things and that wellness aspect. And so certainly it's definitely a passion point for me.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. I think I have it here. Oh yes, so because you spoke out recently about the fertility issues, still a taboo topic in the workplace, yeah. And it's the hashtag My Whole Self campaign.
That's right.
Yeah, can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So 1 in 6 couples experience a fertility challenge at some point in their lives, which is a pretty astonishing number. And then the numbers I just gave you, 1,600 people sitting in Dublin, do the maths on that, right? It's a topic that people carry with them, and I think having experienced it personally, there is this real taboo about, can I talk to my boss about this? Can I talk to my team? It might be that you're going through IVF. It might be that you're struggling, with fertility challenges, as I said. It might be that you've experienced a miscarriage. It's a pretty horrific thing to go through, right? Because it's so emotive. And it's so personal, but at the same time, you can't just check that at the door when you walk into the office or when you log on to Zoom. And we, you know, certainly at LinkedIn, we talk a lot about being able to bring our whole selves to work. And if that's really the case, then surely we should be able to come and express, you know, I'm having a bad day. You know, I'm about to start my IVF, I'm taking hormones, or, you know, I've had a miscarriage, I'm going to need to take some time off. And really making those conversations okay. And I think that it just tied in beautifully to that my whole self. Because I really do, I mean, you know, as I said, speaking from personal experience, and speaking on both sides, right? So speaking as somebody who went through IVF, who experienced miscarriages, who didn't talk about it in her previous role, to now, people can't stop me talking about it. Because I do believe it is that important to actually open up and kind of and set an example and try to break the taboo, and make it okay for people to be in a difficult situation and actually ask for that time off. And again, back to our Comp and Ben team, you know, just incredible work. They introduced a fertility benefit. So we're currently paying €27,000 towards the cost of fertility treatments for any of our employees who need it around the world, which, you know, when I see that and I think about, you know, the pressure that I experienced when I was earlier in career trying to pay for IVF, it's bloody expensive. Your health insurance doesn't really cover it. If I'd had this at the time, I mean, this would have just alleviated so much pressure and so much stress. So I think, again, huge kudos to them and for just thinking outside the box. And then, you know, I'm the spokesperson, effectively. I'm the person who experienced it, and I'm happy to kind of share my story if that helps others.
Fantastic. Yeah, like, so, I mean, you're really leading by example there, which is so important, as you've mentioned, in, you know, so many aspects of work and life, from the well-being perspective, and as well the overlap with the fertility then as well. When were you driving this yourself, or were you involved in the actual campaign, the comp and benefits team, or is this just something that has tied in and you've got on board now?
Yeah, it kind of feels like it was just this beautiful marriage. So our benefit was always there in the US. So you know, we had always paid for fertility and for adoption out of the US, but it wasn't something actually that a lot of companies do in Europe, just because of how challenging it is to work with health insurance companies, to just to set up the systems and the processes, right? And so this was something that, from a financial perspective and from a benefit perspective, again, Catherine Gilbert and the Comp and Ben team really wanted to roll out beyond North America. And then as part of our conversations as a leadership team, as a HR leadership team around how we would do this, you know, I opened up about my experiences, you know, and even in kind of talking about, well, what should be covered, right, as part of this fertility treatment. I remember having conversations with the team and saying, well, I really think that this should be covered because, you know, this was something that I needed. And you're almost, I won't say co-creating, because, you know, the kudos definitely lies with them, but definitely, you know, giving input into that process. And then as part of this, just feeling like I'm a HR leader, how can I stand behind a policy where I'm talking about something that is so deeply personal to me? And it shouldn't just be about the financial, it should be about creating an environment where people feel that they can talk about this. Yeah. And so, you know, I kind of took that angle of, if we're going to roll out a benefit, I also want like the structure and the ability for people to feel comfortable having this. So fabulous that we'll pay for the fertility treatment, but then being able to turn up on a Monday and tell your manager, this has happened and I'm going to need to take some time. And so that really became my passion project. And you know, I've spoken about it many times now since. And the amount of our employees who have kind of come forward and have used the benefit and have also just been so appreciative of the ability to talk about this in an open way, candidly.
Yeah, you know, it sounds like it's overlap with when I talk about well-being in the workplace. You know, if you want to bring people with you, I mean, the way to do it, and it's very simplified, but it's the evidence, so facts, figures, financials, plus the personal stories.
Yeah.
Talk about the personal stories of the people in your organization that have experience in this area. I mean, once they're comfortable, of course, but share those stories, talk about them, make them open, create
Yeah.
a more psychologically safe environment for people to talk about this. Plus the facts and the figures and the data in the area as well.
Exactly. And that was the whole point, right? It didn't sit right with me that we would roll out this policy and I wouldn't be open and honest about my own experience, and try to at least set some sort of a precedence for having these conversations. And actually it was incredible the amount of guys who, you know, who would just come up to me and say, thank you, this is something my wife and I, or my partner and I, are going through. And I think because I had the experience of seeing my own husband and how he was kind of dealing with our challenge, a lot of people sort of assume this is like a female problem or a female challenge, or it's only women that, you know, feel the emotion. And actually it's all of us, right? This is incredibly difficult stuff to go through. So I think that for me was the big learning, that just, it's not just women who need to talk about this, right? It's everybody who's going through it.
Sounds like it's a great way of breaking down barriers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having conversations.
Yeah.
What about people listening in, I guess, they're they're independent, or maybe they're from smaller organizations with less budgets, and they're here, and look, the wonderful supports that LinkedIn are putting in place, and I think that's all fine. They're a massive, but you have experience in other organizations as well. There's a lot organizations can be doing across these areas. What advice would you have for those organizations listening in?
Yeah, like I couldn't agree more. Like totally recognize the privileged position that we're in as employees of LinkedIn. And, you know, not everybody's going to be in a position to grant 60 days, right, of, you know, paid leave, right? Like that's on the other end of the spectrum. 100%. I think what's worked is like creating that open environment, right? That costs nothing. Being an authentic leader and saying, I'm having a really tough day today, and actually making it okay to have a tough day. We're in the middle of a pandemic, people. Like, it's not all supposed to be happy clappy all the time. You know, creating like moments of fun, right? So maybe that's, you know, delivering you know, the juice, right, or a juice box to people's houses. Like it's a small outlay, but maybe that's a Friday morning. It puts a smile on a couple of people's faces, and you have your juice or your coffee morning together, right? And just creating those moments where it's not all about the work, where it's about people as well. You know, maybe on a Friday afternoon, you tell everybody to take, you know, the next 2 hours off, go spend it with their family. Again, that costs you nothing, right? And so I totally agree. I don't think it's about like the big budget stuff. I actually don't think that's what makes a real difference. I do think it's about the culture. And I think it's about, you know, allowing people to have their difficult moments, making sure that people are using their PTO, right? Something as simple as that. I pulled a report for last year. Our PTO usage was way down versus year over year because people couldn't go anywhere. They didn't want to take it. And so, you know, we've done a bit of a campaign around, please, you know, take your time, right? This is time that you are owed. You need to decompress. Put away the laptop, even if it's a walk on the seafront, or, you know, whatever's within your 5 kilometers, go do that. So I think just it's back to basics, Brian, right? It's just how would you want to be treated? How do you want to be spoken to? And, you know, certainly, as I said, turning up sometimes on a Monday and saying, wow, I'm really not in the headspace for this today. And being very genuine about it, and kind of, you know, not all of us can be on 100% all of the time. Yeah, couple of little tips.
Some great tips. There's some great advice, and, you know, the culture. I mean, what is culture? It's behaviors, and we're echoing back to it's leaders. You know, build that culture with their behaviors. You've demonstrated that quite a few times already, and quite a few of the initiatives you've mentioned there are actually, there's zero cost whatsoever involved. I mean, if budget is an issue for some, no meeting Friday you mentioned. There's also what I'm hearing and liking is some people, instead of the no meeting and a full day Friday, it's like a no meeting Monday morning, no meeting Friday afternoon. That's what I would vote for.
Yeah.
as a leader, maybe, you decide not to send emails after 7 p.m., that kind of thing. You can easily schedule them for 8 a.m. the next morning, 9 a.m.
Yeah.
Another 45 minutes, change the company default on Teams or Zoom meetings from 1 hour to 45 minutes.
Love that.
People will fill the hour if it's there.
Yes. Oh my God.
Default to
Totally
45.
agree. Yeah, I literally just had this conversation with somebody. It was just like, no more 30 minutes. Like, we're going to do 25 minutes. Like that's what we're going for. And just being able to like build in that time where, if you're in a working environment, you'd be moving between the floors, or you'd be going to a different part of the building. And so you just kind of need that 5 minutes, maybe just to go and refill your water, right? Go and take a quick fresh air break, whatever it is. So I love that one. I totally agree.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
You must be missing as good as the online, the remote piece is. You must be missing the camaraderie, your colleagues, person. You've got there is a wonderful office, the location there in Dublin. You've got a gym. I've been lucky enough to visit. You've got a fantastic canteen there. You must be missing that environment.
Yeah. I mean, there's no hiding it. I used to kind of quite like the idea of doing a day a week working from home. And I'll probably, so we're going to allow all of our employees to work remotely up to 50% of the time, even after we return. But I really look forward to being in the office 4 days a week. And then I think I'll probably take that Friday, as I mentioned, to do my future planning, no meetings, no Zoom, nothing. And just kind of take that time for myself. But I do miss it. We're actually in the process of building a new office, so it will be online by next summer. And we did a call recently with our architects and our workplace amazing team. They do a phenomenal job. And they showed us the designs, and it gave me such I don't know, not homesickness, work sickness, to get back in and actually just to see real people in the flesh and be in kind of that great environment. So yeah, I definitely can't wait to experience that again.
Nice. Yeah. And just out of curiosity for the new building design, I wonder, are there any kind of changes now? Are there kind of maybe more relaxation spaces and kind of well-being zones? Would that be, and breakaway areas?
And fresh air, actually, fresh air areas. So we're going to have working spaces. I mean, this is going to sound, so spoiled. But we will have a rooftop terrace, and there will be working spaces up there for people to actually be able to get that fresh air. And if we think about even our ventilation system and, all of that sort of stuff is something I know our architects and workplace are thinking way more about than they ever would have before. How can we pump as much clean, fresh air into the building as we possibly can? And things like literally, using the open spaces and allowing people kind of that workspace outdoors, I think will be huge. We're also looking at, occupations, or what we thought it could potentially fit, to now having much less desks, more space between the desks will be critical as well. And, thinking about how we can actually encourage kind of that maintaining your own area in a very clean and a very efficient way. So I think there's lots of thought going into it. It's certainly going to be a very different environment. We opened our building for about 2 months last summer when the cases were super low.
Yeah.
And even that was a strange experience, wearing a mask around the building. You're handed kind of a little bottle of antibacterial spray, and you'd spray down your own desk area. And, it just felt very different than what it had done before. Yeah. I think even when we go back to, normal, things will definitely feel different for sure. But I love that concept of kind of that fresh air coming into the building.
That sounds nice. Yeah. Really good. And I'm guessing already that you mentioned kind of the 50% remote, 50% on site. I'm sure you've been listening to colleagues on that. Is that where the demand is? Is that what people are looking for? Is that kind of the best mix?
I think so. So I think there's two aspects. So I think there will be when things go back to normal and the offices are reopened. I think, there's a lot of people who will actually continue to enjoy working from home and the flexibility that brings. Likewise, I think there's a lot of people, who have been living in smaller apartments, maybe they're flat sharing and actually can't wait to get back to an office 5 days a week. So, kind of looking at and we were surveying all of our employees globally, asking them like what their preference would be. So we were literally going straight to our employees versus, just cascading a decision. And what came back was, that 50% a week mix and the ability to choose, I think, was super important. So that's the flexibility we're going to offer, 50-50 or up to 50. And, obviously people can come in 5 days a week, or they can, work at home 2 days a week, whatever their preference is. So we'll certainly do that. And then I think the other piece that was probably, pretty significant was just people looking for, can I actually go full remote, right? Can I potentially, go down to the country? Can I look at that as an option? And so, or can I leave the country? Like we're also kind of running a separate process where we're looking at that angle as well, and saying what works for the company, because you want to maintain kind of that hub. Dublin is our international hub. And so we really don't want to break that, especially with the investment in real estate as well. But we also want to be mindful of what will work for our employees. So that's the big question that we're trying to solve at the moment.
Really good. Yeah. So it sounds like quite a few options on the table there. A lot of interesting options to be explored. Is it? I imagine one of them is then I'm hearing some other organizations are looking at it from the team perspective again. If you are doing the 50-50 model, it makes sense for one particular team to be in at the same time, as opposed to, again, missing each other kind of separate days. I imagine that's something, again, that's being explored.
That's very much top of mind. Yeah. So kind of making sure that managers are engaged in those conversations with their people. And, if there's a team meeting, that it happens on the day that everybody's in the office. Or if you've got people in different, locations, making sure that, again, you can all come together. So I think that will be super critical.
Yeah. Very good. And we were kind of touched on it, like, what are your own thoughts? What will the future of work look like in a year, 2 years time? A nice, easy question. It'll take time for, even with all this, the talk of the 50-50, even that, I think it'll take time for that to bed down in a couple of years time. And like, what will the working environment look like?
Look, I still think that there's going to be, a need for your brick and mortar office. I don't see that kind of disappearing into the past. I think that people will still want to gravitate towards that sense of community and a sense of community that you can really only get from that face-to-face. But I think there will be less reliance on it than there has been in the past. So I think definitely more openness to people working from home, more agility. I think what this has taught us is that people can be incredibly productive, working from home. That it's not that you have to be sitting in an office under kind of daily supervision. That's certainly, I think, been absolutely kiboshed. People, have definitely demonstrated that they're incredibly self-motivated, hardworking, and determined to get results. I mean, certainly that's been my experience, and hats off to every single person who's like battled through it with less than perfect Wi-Fi, perhaps in less than ideal, surroundings. But I think agility and flexibility is the future.
Agility and flexibility, yeah, absolutely, 100% agree there. And it sounds like you're definitely listening, and you're asking the right questions anyway. So definitely going about it the right way. And we'll finish off, and we've concentrated on the organization quite a bit. And we did touch on it in the beginning, actually, but your own well-being, your busy role. It's the walking with the dog. You must be missing the gym though. How do you kind of schedule time, the remote commute or the fake commute, as you said? You
totally
build in the well-being into your day.
Yeah, for sure. So I do the fake commute in the morning, and then I have my little home gym set up kind of out the back garden. And make sure I get 30 minutes a day, maybe, if I'm being good, but it's a bit of movement and I never regret it. So that's that's key. And then I also think the food piece as well is critical, because I think, again, we were spoilt in LinkedIn, having our lunches and our breakfasts in there, and so that's again required a shift to thinking more planfully. I'm a vegetarian, so what does that mean? How can I make sure that I'm looking after myself? But it's all those little things that you had to adjust to at the start. The fake commute, making sure you kept moving, what it's going to mean for your food, because it's easy to think you're in the middle of a pandemic, it's not going to last that long, I'll treat myself on a Monday night, and then that pandemic turns into a year and you're in a very different situation. So I think we're all learning a little bit of self-discipline at the moment.
Absolutely, we are, and we're all looking forward to the gyms and the coffee shops and the restaurants and all of it opening up as well.
Totally. Yeah, bring it on. I'm ready.
Listen, Lisa, thanks so much for your time. We really enjoyed this conversation. Where could people go to find out more about you if they want to reach out and the work you do?
Sure. So LinkedIn, I'll give our platform the plug. You can find me on LinkedIn. Absolutely. That's probably the best place to make contact.
Brilliant. Listen, Lisa.
Thanks so much, Brian. Great to see you.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Hello, everyone. Brian here again. A big thank you for listening right to the end of this episode of the Work Well podcast. I want to give a big shout out to our partners, the Fruit People, who are leading the way in workplace nutrition, both in office and remotely. You can check them out at thefruitpeople.ie. And it's with thanks to the Fruit People that we have a delicious fresh fruit and healthy snack pack to give away to one lucky listener for each episode of season 3. To find out how to enter, go to workwellpodcast.com and find the link to the latest podcast episode. Finally, are you interested in diving deeper in the area of workplace well-being? Why wouldn't you? You need to check out the Work Well Institute. The Work Well Institute is an online hub for all your workplace well-being, education, and training needs, whether you're an individual or an organization. Head on over to workwellinstitute.org, where you'll find out the details on all the courses available, including my flagship program, Developing a Workplace Wellness Program That Lasts. Check it out at workwellinstitute.org. Thanks again for listening. The original music for this podcast was composed by my friend Greg Clifford. Thank you, Greg. Remember to work well, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Work Well podcast.